and 3 people have died after a submarine was hit by a wave in Kommetjie. This is near Cape Town. According to the National Sea Rescue Institute, a distress signal was sent out earlier in the day after 7 mariners were washed out at sea during a naval exercise. 2 of them were confirmed dead initially, but a third later died in the course of this particular incident. Defense analyst is Dean Wingrin, joining us now to talk to us about safety measures, particularly during naval exercises. Dean, good morning to you and thank you for your time. What exactly do you understand happened here?
Good morning and thank you for having me. And firstly, I'd just like to extend my condolences to the families of the crew and colleagues for this tragic incident. And yes, the submarine was on its way from its base in Simonstown around the peninsula to the V&A waterfront. There's a Navy festival taking place there this weekend. And the Navy was taking the opportunity to undergo various exercises with the crew during that transit. And one of these exercises is a VERTREP exercise. This is a vertical replenishment exercise. It's done with a helicopter, where a helicopter will practice hoisting personnel from the deck of the submarine up to the helicopter and vice versa. And this could also include, also transferring cargo between the two. And this is something that is fairly often carried out between the Air Force and the Navy. And it's good that the Navy took this opportunity to undertake these exercises. As you may have seen, the weather conditions around the Cape has not been very kind. And the seas, there was quite a large swell running, in excess of 3 meters, strong wind. And there's an adage that the Defence Force should train as the one to fight, as well as therefore you fight as you train. But being a peacetime operation, there are certain limitations you don't want to exceed. And from what I understand, the commander of the exercise reviewed the conditions and actually cancelled the exercise. And so there wasn't a helicopter in the immediate vicinity. And it was very shortly after the exercise was cancelled that these members were so tragically swept off the deck of the submarine. And we saw what ensued from that.
Oh, goodness. So, in other words then, Dean, given the weather conditions, should that exercise even have been contemplated?
Well, with all the best forecasting, it's only the conditions at the time that you at sea, and that's where you make the final decision. And I believe the commander of the exercise made the correct choice to cancel the exercise. So this incident didn't take place during the actual vertical replenishment exercise. And I should add as well that there are certain standard operating procedures that should be adhered to when these exercises take place. When crew's on deck, there's certain measures that must be taken for the safety of the crew. And these include, you have a safety line that is strung from the top of the sail, or what people often refer to as a conning tower, and this goes down to the bow or the front of the vessel. And the crew who are on deck would clip themselves to the safety wire precisely to prevent themselves from falling into the sea or drifting away from the submarine, in addition to having their own personal inflatable life jacket that's tied around their waist. So these are all things that the Board of Inquiry will have to look at, if these safety procedures were actually adhered to or not. And if there were, why did this still occur?
A defense analyst, Dean, his name is Darren Olivier. He is quoted in the News 24 article as suggesting that, yes, this has happened, but it has happened to some of the best trained and best funded navies in the world. But his problem is that so many personnel swept off, and he indicates that there is a serious failure somewhere. Do you think that his analysis is spot on, or is he perhaps too hard?
Well, he's certainly correct that these type of incidents have occurred overseas and in some of the bigger, more professional navies. It's a hazard of submariners. But yes, this is something the Board of Inquiry will definitely have to look at. If it is found that certain safety protocols were not adhered to, then that is a serious deficiency and someone would have to be held accountable for that.
How tragic is this as we conclude the conversation? A Gqeberha woman and Africa's first female to work as a qualified submarine navigator. Lieutenant Gillian Malo was among those 3 who sadly lost their lives.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. I'd just like to correct that article in that they used the maiden name. It's actually Lieutenant Commander Gillian Hector, and she's actually the executive officer of the submarine, and which is an extremely senior position. And she actually oversees the actual running of the submarine under the overall command of the submarine captain. And it is so tragic that so many of those who lost their lives are actually very senior members of the crew. And even the captain himself, I believe, was seriously injured.
Yeah.
And just shows you just how tragic the incident is, and the professionalism of the Navy, that more junior staff members had to take over the running of the submarine and the distress calls and so on. And so it just also shows the importance of training, of the Navy being at sea. The Navy's budget has been depleted so much over at least the last 10 years, 1 decade, that it needs all the sea days that it can get in order to train its crew and for the crew members to maintain their proficiencies.
Dean Wingrin, let me thank you very much for your analysis of what has happened here. Dean Wingrin is a defense analyst, and heartfelt condolences to the families